got older, I gravitated more towards the running side of things. Jimmy gravitated towards wrestling and grappling. I'm an ultra marathoner at this point. I've run multiple ultra marathons. I finished the Leadville 100 3 times. Jimmy's a purple belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And so we like to connect with coaches, athletes, health and optimization experts and specialists in their field, and just present conversations to our listeners that we wish people would have had with us when we were a little bit younger. Like I said, I was presented your information a long time ago. I wasn't ready to receive it. And then as I started dabbling into ultra marathons and experimenting with different protocols and things, um, I found that by slowing down, I got faster. And so, like I said, it was probably 20 years after I had first discovered you that I started getting into it and having a lot of success with it. So we're very grateful for your time today.
Thank you. It's really nice to be here.
Absolutely. So a little intro for you for the folks that are listening. Thanks for tuning in. We are live. Our guest today is world-renowned expert in his field. He comes from a background of biology, kinesiology, physiotherapy, and Chinese medicine. Uh, when I was first presented him and his work, it was with his transformation of Mark Allen, 6 time world champion, and his later part of his career and his success. Our guest has published more than 20 books, including the Big Book of Endurance Training and Racing, the Big Book of Health and Fitness, and most recently, The Overfat Pandemic. He's also a musician and a songwriter. He's worked with legendary producer Rick Rubin and artists like drummer Brad Wick of Rage Against the Machine and bassist for the Red Hot Chili Peppers, John Frusciante. Dr. Phil Maffetone, welcome to the podcast. It is an honor and a pleasure. How are you today, sir?
Thanks, guys. I'm good. I'm good. It's There's a heat wave here in northern Vermont. Um, but I'm good. Life is wonderful.
Awesome. And so before we get into it, why don't you give everyone your socials, your website, anywhere you want people to find your books, your information, your content? The floor is yours.
Well, we the health and fitness website, philmaffetone.com, is where there are a lot of hundreds of articles that are available for free. There's discussions about some of my research and other things. You can't the site has sort of been in a transition period, um, and most of my activity from week to week is on my music website, maffetonemusic.com. And I not just have music, but I have articles about the brain and about um, I have a chapter excerpt from my latest book called Be Sharp, about exercise and music. So those things you'll see regularly there. My list of podcasts, recent podcasts, is there as well. Um, and You can get my books anywhere. Amazon is
Awesome.
always a good bet.
Yeah, and I'm a physical education teacher, and your book about brain development in children has piqued my interest, and so that's probably next on my purchase list because I'm fascinated by that. And as a physical education teacher, I'm constantly talking to students about what they put in their mouth and what they consume and how that has such an impact on their brain function. And so the combination of exercise and nutrition with students from a health perspective, but then also from an academic perspective is really something that I try to hit home with the kids, but also with the teachers who and counselors and principals. And it seems like every time someone does something good, they're given a sweet treat or some sort of junk food to reward either their behavior or their performance. And I'm like, that's probably the worst thing you could give them.
Yes, it's all about love, they think.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the topic. That's part of the topic of my current research. I'm writing a research paper on having a better brain through lifestyle, through healthy lifestyle, and how that impacts not only the individual, which I've written a lot about, but how that impacts society as a whole and the planet. actually.
Yeah, we're going through it right now, and we're just trying to create those ripple effects with presenting information like this and helping people. So we're, as I said, are honored to get you in there. So, like I said, I came to your information and who you were probably in 2003, 2004. I had gotten out of running and trying to transition more into triathlons for a little bit because I was dealing with some injuries and I was doing a lot of cross training. And I had a good friend who was an Ironman and said, "You're doing all this stuff. Why don't you just get into triathlons?" And so I got into triathlons and we were training and we were running on a fairly hilly course. We were doing our long run and his heart rate monitor watch and everything started beeping. And he said, "Hey, man, I have to slow down. We're going too fast up this hill. My heart rate's spiking." And coming from a track background and cross country background in college, where I just always thought faster is better. I got to run faster to get faster. I just couldn't understand it, couldn't wrap my head around it. And so we didn't train as much after that together on some of those days. And fast forward to 2014, and I started to, well, actually, before that, in 2011 was when I did my first ultra marathon, and I quickly learned that I needed to learn how to run slow because I wasn't going to be able to run sub 3 hour marathon pace for 24 hours, and I needed to teach myself to find that forever pace, and that's when I started to remember that run and those conversations about you and your methods, and that's when I stumbled upon and started researching the 180 minus your age. So I think that's a great place to start. That's what really helped me transform my ultra marathoning career. So if you want to, for the folks that are listening that maybe don't aren't familiar with you or the math method and the 180 minus your age, if you could give us a little breakdown of that and how that translates over to getting faster by going slower.
Yeah, the method in general is a whole big picture kind of thing. It's not what's the best running schedule or what diet should we be eating as a runner or as an athlete. It's about being healthy and being fit. So being healthy means everything in the body's working together. There's a good balance from the brain down to the toes. And being fit means we can perform athletic endeavors uh, better and better. And for many sports, that means getting better and better, regardless of where we're starting age-wise. Um, we certainly don't sprint as fast, as when we get higher up in age. Um, but that's why they have age groups. We compete against our peers if we want to compete. But when something breaks down with that balance of health and fitness, we get injured, we get slower, we get frustrated, we get depressed, our energy goes down, something happens, which means something is wrong, and your job as a human athlete is to figure out what went wrong. And uh, one of the things that this math method teaches is to individualize um, your entire life, your training, your existence, but training and diet in particular, and rather than as opposed to looking in the magazines and following the latest trend. And some of those trends have lasted a long time. The carbohydrate trend, for one, the no pain, no gain trend. It's been around really forever. Actually, Benjamin Franklin was the first person to promote that way back. Um, and it's kind of stuck as a social thing. We need to work hard and kill ourselves to get through, and that's no way to live. So, uh, what I developed along the way to help people figure out their optimal training and food intake and so forth. Um, I developed a number of things, tests and trials, food challenges, one of which is called the 180 formula, which is what heart rate is best for you to train at. And that heart rate is a heart rate that allows you to build up the aerobic system. The aerobic system is a fat burning system. Most of our muscle fibers are aerobic fibers. In the human body, those fibers are mixed with the anaerobic fibers, unlike in a chicken, which has separate aerobic fibers and anaerobic fibers, the light and dark meat. And by developing the aerobic system, we have better aerobic muscle function, so we stabilize our joints better. It gives us more endurance, so we have more long-term energy, which is what fat is. Um, we have better brain function and so forth. And so we're healthier in the process. And at the same time, we literally get faster by training at that uh, what most people would perceive as a slower pace because they're training at a heart rate that's lower than they're used to. And so for a runner, they're running at a slower pace, they're biking at a slower pace. And it's a clash with the no pain, no gain thing. And you're right, you don't make friends when you're out there on the road. And I've gotten used to that over the years. But it's so wonderful to feel better. It's so wonderful to not be injured. It's so wonderful when you see that first glimpse of, hey, wow, I'm running 30 seconds a mile faster than I was a month ago. What what's that all about? Well, all you're doing is you're burning more fat for energy. Um, and when you burn more fat for energy, you store less fat. Um, and it's amazing. I mean, I've been doing this since the 70s. So, I've been watching um, the, the athletes in all the sports, um, kind of evolve, the amateurs, but some of the professionals too, and the amount of body fat, excess body fat that we're seeing in athletes, is astounding. It's sad. Um, but when you train right and burn more fat for energy, you have more energy all day long, but you also store less body fat. So by getting rid of excess body fat, you automatically run better. So that's part of the big picture.
So I have a question that maybe Rich already knows, and a lot of people listen know, and they're just gonna shake my head that I'm asking this, but I'm kind of a meathead. I like to go slow too, but having that wrestling background, having that CrossFit background, I'm real big on training those energy systems. Doing your short sprints to kind of build that power, kind of build that speed. I'm curious how you build those energy systems when you're going slow.
Well, you first build the aerobic system. That's your long-term energy system. Once you've done that, you you can do those faster, those what you call sprints, which when you're a track and field athlete, you have a different definition of that. Um, we don't ever sprint when we're running a marathon or an ultra marathon. We run fast uh, going to the finish, but true sprinting, no, not really. Um, but so we can train that way once we build the aerobic system. If we try to train that way while we're building the aerobic system, aerobic development will not reach a an optimal level. Will inhibit the process. Um, and it's the same with strength, which would be the next logical question. How do we get strong if we're not lifting weights? If we lift weights in the traditional way, where we get sore after a workout and we have to wait 2 or 3 days to recover, um, that's that can impair aerobic progress. So we either hold off on those weights, and that type of weight training adds muscle bulk, and it adds a fair amount of weight. And for most athletes, that's not a good thing. We want strength. Strength and muscle bulk are two different things. So we can develop strength by lifting a certain way where we don't fatigue the muscles, and then that does not impair aerobic process, aerobic development. I have a book somewhere out there called Get Strong, which talks about all of this. So we can add all of those systems. Our creatine phosphate system is already there. It already exists. We don't have to do anything to encourage it. If we're walking down the street and all of a sudden there's a huge lightning storm and we're out in the open, we're going to sprint. We have that um, very short-term energy at all times. It's the sympathetic nervous system that gives us that. But the sprint training that you referred to um, is a development of those anaerobic fibers, which we all would like to do. Some people don't need them as much as others. Some people have a lifestyle where their stress levels are high, and adding another stress into their life is not a good idea. Um, but I've done that myself. I've built my aerobic system, and then I'd go and do various things. I like doing fartlek workouts because it gives our brain the opportunity to dictate the workout without our um, interference from other people, our days on the track, the no pain, no gain. It's everywhere. Um, so developing all those systems is important, and it's part of what part of what my uh, encouraging athletes is all about, to develop everything.
Is there an average as far as building that aerobic system? I know with diet, everything is, not one size fits all. It's different per person. Is it the same with building the systems?
It is, and like with food, it depends on the person and their needs. So if you're like Rich was talking about, getting hurt and finally um, deciding to try something different, um, if you're coming off, or worse, if you're burned out, if you're an overtrained athlete, burned out, injured, and you're wondering why you're even doing this, which is unfortunately a lot of people, it could take you've trashed your aerobic system now, and you've trashed it for a long time. So it could take you 6 months, pure aerobic training for 6 months to build your aerobic system. Um, but that doesn't mean you're going to be training quote unquote slow for 6 months, because you get faster and faster. So some people are not so bad, and they just need to build the aerobic system for maybe 3 months. And the way you could tell is as you build the aerobic system and you get faster, um, you'll be able to, there's something called the MAF test, where you do a warm up, you're on the track, and you run on the track at your MAF heart rate, that 180 minus the age, which is modified a specific way, which we can talk about in a moment. But um, you've got your training heart rate, and you're annoyed because you're training slow, and you test yourself every month, and you find that now you're getting faster. So after 6 months of aerobic training, um, you could be a lot faster at the same heart rate. And as that happens, our race performance, endurance race performance, increases as well. And I can't tell you how many athletes have performed personal bests in a 5K, 10K marathon, ultra marathon, after only building the aerobic system, and now running at faster paces, but doing no anaerobic training whatsoever. Um, and I've seen it on professional levels, and I've seen it um, on amateur levels. People who have been racing for a long time, all of a sudden at age 40, they run a PR for 10K. That's a way to impress yourself. Um, so it depends on the person. And so but what's important is you want that aerobic base building period where that's all you're doing is aerobic training. And you'll get faster and faster. And how quickly you progress really depends on how stressed your life is. If you're managing your stress well, um, and you're eating well, that's a big part of it because the food is actually a significant stress on the body if it's not correct for your needs. Um, the food is actually more important than the training. Um, so if you're doing all that correctly, I've seen people take a minute a mile off their aerobic pace at their aerobic heart rate after a month. I've seen people do a lot more than that, but a minute a mile would not be unusual. I've seen in 6 months, I've seen people take 2, 3 minutes off their pace per mile, running at the same heart rate. Um, and then you get the real dedicated people who just keep getting faster. And it's interesting because people in the beginning complain that they're going so slow and how am I going to deal with this? What am I going and part of them are just really saying, what are my friends going to think when they see me training so slow? It's like, run at night, I would tell them. So in the beginning they complain, and then as the months go by and as they get faster and faster, they complain they're going too fast now. Hey, how could I can't train this fast every day. This is but it's the same heart rate. So the exertion, the energy use and all that is essentially the same. Your muscles have to go through a period of development. Your body chemistry, hormones, and metabolism have to make adjustments, and you do that along the way naturally. And sometimes you notice those signs and symptoms of that happening, but um, there's a dedication that's needed. It's not unlike any dedication in sports. It's not about following a program. It's about using the brain. People get annoyed when I say the brain's the most important thing for an athlete. I don't know why they get annoyed, but it is. It's what regulates the whole thing.
Yeah, so often say your best friend or your worst enemy is the 3 inches between your ears.
Yeah.
But I have a little anecdotal story for you. And one of the reasons why I love your work and what you do and how I prescribe it for my athletes is especially with new athletes, it lets me know very quickly if it's going to be a good working relationship or not because of that sort of pushback or commitment or sticking to it. And so I had a friend who was signed up for the Philadelphia Marathon last year. We started working in July, and up until that point, he had probably not run more than like 6 or 7 miles. And so I went home to New Jersey. We met for a run and we did 10 miles, and he was about 10 minutes and 30 seconds a mile. And, we nasal breathed the whole time. And fast forward to November when he ran the Philadelphia Marathon, he ran 26.2 miles and he ran it at 9 minutes and 30 seconds a mile. So there's your, 1 minute faster per mile over, 16 more miles. So, it shows you that who's going to be committed to it and the results that they're going to
Yep.
have. And, like I said, it weeds out the people that are going to be difficult to work with when, like you said, that's that first couple runs where like, this is ridiculous. This is too slow. I was nasal breathing and then I had or they're like, it was fine for the first 2 miles. It was nasal breathing. And then I had a switch. I'm like, no, that's your indicator that you need to slow down. You have to be committed to it. You have to be patient with it. And so you see the results with the people that are patient and stick to it. And um, again, like the using the heart rate as a gauge has been very beneficial for me, but also the nasal breathing and the rhythmic aspect to the nasal breathing and using that. And I'm not a big fan of watches and those sorts of things. My friends are always amazed when I go out and run because I don't run with a watch. I don't I like to have that sensory data, that feedback from my body. So I rely a lot on nasal breathing. But what I also find sometimes is when I do use the just the nasal breathing and I do wear the heart rate monitor, sometimes I can cheat it a little bit. And even with my nasal breathing, I can still get above that 180 minus my age. I'm 48, so like 132 is my my maximum aerobic threshold. So sometimes I still get above that, especially down here in the South with the heat and the humidity.
Yeah, the heat and humidity, like the very cold temperatures, will make you slow down naturally when you're following your heart rate. And it's interesting that you're not running with the heart monitor. And I run with it at times to monitor, just to test myself. Um, but I don't remember when I stopped wearing the heart monitor on a regular basis. It was years, decades ago. And people would always say, "Well, where's your heart monitor?" I know what I know what a certain heart rate feels like, all
Mhm.
the way up from the resting up to max. I know what it feels like to run at 121 or 138 or 150. And we have a brain that knows that. We intuitively know what levels of intensity are best for us. And I've seen a few athletes over the years who were able to do that. Um, And when I went through the whole process like I would do in my clinic, I would evaluate a person for quite a while, and then we'd go to the track, and then they would run um, at what I thought was their max aerobic heart rate. I didn't use the 180 formula one-on-one because I think a better way to do it. So I would analyze their gait, I would analyze their breathing at different heart rates, and then I'd say, okay, I think where you need to be is at this heart rate. Let's do that for a couple of weeks and see how that goes. Um, and then a lot of them would say, oh, well, that equates to this pace, and that's the pace I run at every day about. Um, you occasionally see that, and it's somebody usually who's not getting interference from, uh, the social trends from other people. They're actually just intuitive about their body, and like you say, you want to sense your body, and that's why I discourage people listening to music when they work out because I want you listening to your body. I don't want you listening to my music either. I want you listening to your body because now your brain hears the body, and it can make adjustments from moment to moment so that you're getting an optimal performance. You're getting a ideal adaptation to the stress of running or biking or whatever work you're doing. Um, and you're going to recover better as a result. It's just knowing our body, hearing our body, sensing it, is very important.
Yeah, I have ditched the headphones for multiple reasons a while ago, and you jokingly said you don't want people even listening to your music when they're running, so that's a great segue. You said about 20 years ago was when your music career started, and you kind of woke up one morning and maybe had an epiphany that you wanted to do music, and it always had been a passion for you, and you were going to step away from the health care, the athletic side of things, and lo and behold, right around that same time, that same day, you got a call from legendary producer Rick Rubin, who was seeking you out, had read your book and wanted some health advice from you, wanted to work with you from a health perspective. And he's talked about that in depth on some podcasts. So talk to us about what it was like getting that phone call from Rick Rubin and then kind of, I guess, bartering a little bit, you helping him with his health and his wellness and him helping you with the music. And I'm assuming because of that relationship that led to things like Brad Wick and John Frusciante and some of the other musicians you've gotten to work with. So, I mean, what was that like getting the call from Rick and did working with Rick, did that reinvigorate your passion to kind of stick with the health side of things?
It did indirectly, but I grew up in the 60s, and to grow up in the 60s, you're music was everything. Music was our life, and so I was a huge consumer of music, singer-songwriter music, real what I call real music as opposed to industry music. Um, and um, and I never got to learn in school. They said, no, you're not a good student. You don't need another course to bog you down. And it just never happened. I mean, I was able to play three chords on the guitar, which everybody who graduates from the 1960s has to do. And so that was it. Um, and I continued to be a great consumer of new and old music through my adult life. And then 20 years ago, I woke up with this intense passion to be a songwriter. And I think it came from the fact that my biology background and human development and this whole idea that all animals sing and humans sang, and that's how they communicated for millions of years. And it's what promoted the brain to grow literally into a better brain. Um, and I sort of thought I wasn't being human because I didn't write songs. That's what, all animals sing, and I wasn't. And so I paced for a couple of days, wondering what the heck I was going to do because this passion was intense, and I was at the peak of my other career, that other career in health and fitness. And I thought the only thing to do was to quit that career and start learning how to play and write. And that's when Rick called. Actually, I got a call from one of my publishers who said Rick kept calling him, wanting my phone number. And this editor called me and said, Rick, this guy Rick Rubin keeps calling. And I said, no, just tell him I'm not doing that anymore. And by the way, I'm not writing any more books. And and so we and I kind of knew the name Rick Rubin, but I wasn't so interested in that part of the music world. Um, and this editor said, well, if I said to him, I'm a songwriter now. He said, well, you should call this guy. So I did, and I did the same thing with Rick. He said, I read your book. I want to consult with you. I said, I don't do that anymore because I just became a songwriter. And we had a really wonderful conversation after that and decided he would help me with my music, and I would help him with his health. And we've continued that all these years. And yeah,
That's it.
so when I guess at one point soon after that, I moved to LA and, um, because there was a lot happening there, of course, in the music world and, hanging out with Rick for 5 years. Got me places where I may not have gone on my own. I did see musicians before I became a songwriter, but this was different. You were in the music jungle. I called it my music prison because I couldn't go anywhere. You're in LA. I mean, where are you going to go? Um, which was okay because I'd spend 18 hours a day in a studio or practicing, um, and it would be a few months or maybe I don't know, maybe a year, when I realized that I wasn't changing careers. I was just adding music to the holistic career I had. And music as health is not something I was unfamiliar with. I studied it well, when I was younger, I studied the effect of music on the body. But when I studied acupuncture, um, that was a very important part of Chinese medicine, understanding music and how it affects the body, um, therapeutically and how it maintains health. But I realized at some point that I'm adding music to this holistic paradigm that I had been in my whole life, and then I started saying yes to people who said, "Hey, can you help me with this or that?" Who were in the music world, and um, that was a lot of fun.
So working with Rick, we know he called you for some running tips, and we've seen his transformation over the years. And I'm a huge fan of his podcast. He has some great conversations on there, diverse group of people. He's having health debates on there, bringing Dr. Jack Krause to the light, things like that. And we know he is about kind of carnivore, kind of keto, definitely trying to be in that fat adapted life. And we know that's part of what you do because that was the beginning of this conversation. Did you work with him with nutrition at all, or was it just running?
Oh no, it was everything. It was nutrition was the big thing, but it was exercise. It was using a heart monitor. Um, it was stress, managing stress. He does a lot of fascinating things in music, and there's a good amount of stress, like we all have when we're involved with something we're so passionate about. But we have to manage, we have to balance that life, and so that was part of it as well. Um, I never really worked with anyone just on running or just on uh, driving a race car. It was always there was always a big picture that was very important because all of that influences how well you could drive a race car or how well you could run a marathon or do martial arts. It's almost like the sport is only a small piece of it, but there's this big picture that we have to pay attention to. And if we're not living a healthy and fit life, things are not going to work.
So being a child of the 60s, was that holistic approach, seeing the human as this whole being, always kind of the way you approached it as far as dealing with athletes and people, or did that come as you grew older and got wiser and saw that X equals B or whatever, and they're all connected?
No, I had the holistic paradigm in my brain when I was in high school. As a teenager, I kind of woke up one day, um, and I saw the world in a very different light. I saw it holistically. I saw that everything was connected, and that's what I wanted to do in my life. And I didn't know if that meant becoming a philosopher or a Eastern meditating yogi, or I didn't know. It didn't matter. I was willing to let the process go and see where I ended up, um, and all the different stops along the way, which I'm still doing. Um, so when I started working with athletes, um, as an example, and I've worked with a lot of other groups, so CEOs, I've worked with military people, politicians. I mean, they're all the same. You want to improve their human performance, whatever it is. And in order to do that, you've got to look at the whole picture and say, oh, this is not, this is contributing too much stress, so we need to modify that. And that one is okay, but this one has to be adjusted this way. And and that basic uh, awareness started in high school.
So you brought up a couple times managing stress. What are some of the key practices people can do to manage that stress that you use?
The first thing I encourage people to do is to get rid of things, get rid of stresses that they don't need in their life. And people don't understand how many stresses they're that are just sitting there on their table that they can just be thrown off. The first thing about stress is we need to define it because people think stress is some uh, emotional thing, this kind of hazy stuff in the brain, the psychology, there the research of stress began over 100 years ago. So we have a very good idea about stress, but the social trendiness of stress has made it such that people don't really understand it. There are three kinds of stress. There are physical stresses, um, wearing shoes that don't match our foot, that don't fit properly, that are too thick in the heel, that um, sitting all day in an office, huge stress, um, dental problems. Athletes have a very high rate of dental problems, more than the population. That's another story as to why, but they do. And if they have a dental problem that they're not taking care of, um, it's going to affect their balance. It's going to affect their gait. And in the course of an hour run, they're going to use more energy. They're going to stress the body more. I mean, it's just, it all affects you as a stress. And then there are biochemical stresses, which is the metabolism. Our nutrition is in that category of stress. Biochemical stress is the enzymes in the body, the digestive enzymes, for example. Very, very important. And then there are the mental, emotional stresses that we encounter every day, many of which are related to misinformation. So when you read, um, I hate to trash Runner's World, but
Hmm.
I've been doing it all the time. I remember I was in, I think it was a New York City Marathon lecture. And I was, and some, at the end, they were asking questions. Somebody said, "Why do runners have so many knee problems?" And I said, "It's because of reading Runner's World magazine." And I said that, and it was kind of a joke, and half the people laughed. I think the other half were subscribers. But I think that came to me because I actually had a patient who was a runner, and when I was doing a, a, a history, taking a history um, of their running and their health and fitness, how did this injury start, that kind of thing. It was well, I was doing well, I was running, and then I read an article in Runner's World about how you could get how you could take, minutes off your 10K time by doing this track workout. And we've all seen these things. And so that's I think people don't understand that sports magazines and a lot of the internet um, information sites are more entertaining, not informative. And the informative stuff, or the attempt at making suggestions, recommendations, comes from the fact that they're selling a product. And yeah, I have some books, but I don't care if you buy the books. You can get all this information for free. Um, and so I don't have any, I'm not saying, well, you got to do this, but you have to buy my heart monitor, even though the technology is all the same. You have to buy my heart monitor because it's blue. It's the only blue one out there. No. Um, so beware of what you're reading and where it is and who the influences are. The fact is, magazines, online or not, are the editorial process considers who the advertisers are. And I've been told more than once that you can't say this in the article. If you don't want to take it out, we can't publish your article. And that would be things like, the worst thing to do before a race is to carbo load, or, consume a lot of carbohydrate the morning of the race, or whatever the trend is. And 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 that information is suppressed at the corporate level, because they're saying, hey, our carbohydrate companies are funding our publication, and so we don't want to say anything bad about them. I have a problem with that, but that's, I think that's a stress for people, is they're miseducated. And so any stress, whether it's physical, biochemical, mental, emotional, any stress has to be dealt with first by the brain. The brain senses the stress, either consciously or subconsciously. And now the brain says, okay, we've got to get the body to adjust to that stress, adapt to that stress. And we're going to send messages to the pituitary gland. And here's what we want you to do, pituitary. And the pituitary sends messages to the adrenal glands, among others. and it has the adrenal glands adapt the best it can to the stress by making stress hormone and doing all kinds of things. And but if you're overwhelmed by physical, biochemical, and mental, emotional stresses, your brain can never adapt. It can't. So what I suggest people do is make a stress list. Have a column for physical stress, column for biochemical stress, column for mental, emotional stress. And it could take you days to fill out this stress list. And now maybe you've got 10 or 15 items in each stress. And you look at the ones that are just so silly and like, oh, yeah, my shoes are always hurt my feet. I could just get new ones or take the insert out. That'll give me more room. I mean, I don't have to sit at my desk all day. I can stand up and walk around, maybe walk out in the hall, walk outside. I mean, that's how I write. I have a standing desk, first of all, but I'll sit there and maybe type for 2 minutes and then I'll go wander around uh, for 10 minutes or 20 minutes. And then all of a sudden my brain has figured out something. Okay, I'm going to go back now and work for mental, emotional stresses. Education is such an important thing, but um, don't ask your training partners what you should do for training because maybe they know, some of them may be perfectly capable of helping you. Um, but a lot of them are into the latest trend, and those are huge stresses. So that's the first big step in managing stress. And then if you're healthy, if you have a healthy brain and body, this adaptation mechanism, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, one of the big ones, um, will always work better. But if you're eating a lot of sugar, for example, that mechanism isn't going to work better no matter how many stresses you get rid of because that sugar stress is such a high level stress.
Yeah, it's crazy how telling people to cut sugar out can be so triggering to some people, whether it's
It could they start shaking sometimes because it's an addiction. I know what it's like. I was
yeah,
addicted. It took years. I mean, I was able to stop eating it, but back then it was the trickery in marketing and in packaging wasn't like it is today. It's still bad today. You still don't know what you're getting in many cases. But I mean, when I remember in college looking at something and a label and it said no sugar added. And I opened the package and it's this dried fruit. Well, it had these big sugar crystals on it. And I thought, how could they do that? And I would eventually find out that, well, if the manufacturer added sugar, but they sold it to a distributor and they didn't add sugar, they could say no sugar added on their package. And that eventually was changed. But there's a lot of that still going on today. And um, junk food, people don't, you say you should just cut the junk food out. Oh, I don't eat any junk food. And then I say, well, what'd you have for breakfast? Oh, that's
muffin.
3/4 of that is junk. Oh, it's a whole grain muffin. There's no such thing as whole grain anymore. If you made a whole grain, most people have never seen wheat berries. That's whole grain. If you want to make your own muffins out of whole grain wheat berries, do it. Your kids won't eat it. Your friends won't eat it. You may not eat it because it's not very tasty compared to what the population of the world. And we're not just talking about the Western world. I did a study in India a couple of years ago and showed that 80.5% of Indian adults were over fat. I mean, is that frightening? Yes, it is.
Yeah. So I got one last one for you, Phil. I mentioned I took me a long time to get to your methods and to buy in. And for a long time, especially through high school and college, I lived in that gray area where to get faster, I have to go faster. So my easy runs were too fast, and then which impacted my workouts weren't fast enough. And so we do have some listeners that are coaches of high school kids and youth athletes. So I'm curious about incorporating the math method with, say, high school cross country team.
Yeah, it's a good question. Um, I've worked for teams. I don't like working with teams, not because of what you're alluding to, which I'll get back to in a moment, but the politics of teams, especially in professional teams, the politics dictates everything. It's not about winning a championship. It's about the team making money, and here's how you do that. And TV controls the sport, and the owners are business people, and so now I come along and I say, okay, if you want to prevent injuries, let's do this. If you want to perform your best, that's part of it. And if something gets in the way of that, if it costs a little more money, or if you, I remember, I won't go there. Um, there's just my job is to help somebody get healthier and more fit to perform better. And if somebody's interfering with that process with me, then I don't want to do it. And I've worked with teams and it usually didn't go well, and I would kind of step out. And but when you do have a team, if you're a coach, um, or if you have, running is a hugely social sport. People get together and um, for the traditional Sunday run, you get together with friends or neighbors in the morning to do a workout, whether it's in a gym or going for a bike ride, whatever. There's a huge socialness to it. I never liked that. I always liked going off on my own because it was a meditation. If I'd be with a group and I'd hear people chatting away, the extroverts really mess up there. I just kind of wander off into a different direction. Um, so, how do you deal with a team in that case? How do you deal with this? Do you want to lose all your friends? Um, but the bottom line is you're always going to start and stop at the same place at the same time. So you could get together and do your chatty stuff and say, hi, this is great. The team meets at, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Everybody gets together. But now everybody's going to do a workout. Everybody has their own heart rate or their own pace or their own workout that's individual to them. And it's going to be, say, an hour workout or a 2 hour, whatever. And now they're going to finish and they're all going to be together again. And they'll still be able to socialize in that situation. And it's not that hard to do, even in a school, even at the college and university level, even at the professional level. It's not that hard. You're seeing it now in the professional world, finally. But in a school, if you're a coach, the traditional coaching thing is to stand there on the track and yell faster, faster while you're holding a stopwatch. Faster. I never did that. In fact, I would go to a track with sometimes 15 athletes, and they'd all be doing different workouts and different paces, and I would kind of take notes about who's doing what with respect to their gaits and their breathing and whatever. And I mean, that's what a coach can do. You can get valuable information doing that, but you can hold on to the social aspect and still individualize your training.
And so if, funding is an issue, maybe the school doesn't have the allocations to get heart rate monitors, and maybe not all of the athletes are able to afford them. Is utilizing nasal breathing, is that a good trade-off if in a pinch, and like I said, maybe the kids can't afford a heart rate monitor, or the
Yeah,
fundraise for them?
I think it'll get you in the ballpark, but
Yeah.
there's too many other things that affect nasal breathing, normal abnormalities in the breathing passages, for one. Um, I would rather set something up where um, if you can have one heart monitor. This is what I used to do in the beginning. I thought heart monitors were a great biofeedback tool, and I was going to use them. And if an athlete ran or worked out uh, with a heart monitor a couple of times, they'd realize where they should be from an intensity standard. This was whether it was a dance class. I worked with Broadway athletes for a while, dancers and or a runner or whoever, and okay, this is where I should be working out. And then a month or two later, they can retest themselves. It didn't work that way. They were not willing to let go of all the stuff that forced them to train too fast, especially when they started feeling better. Because when they start training slow, they start feeling better once they overcome the uh, this idea that they're training too slow. But they start feeling better, and now they go faster, usually faster beyond what their heart rate should be. So if the individuals of a team, wherever it is, cannot get a heart monitor, all get a heart monitor, many of them can. The school can. The school can get two or three of them. They're not that expensive. Um, and those who don't have a monitor can borrow them, um, alternate with those who don't have one, and every other day, wear it. I mean, there are ways around that, creative ways that um, until these athletes get a sense of where they should be, and then they'll hopefully rely on the heart monitor less and less. Although there are a lot of people who don't, partly because they want to get every little bit of the workout benefit, and not drift into a high level of intensity that might slow down their aerobic development. I mean, that would be a professional thing, that would be understood. But on a team, or uh, age groupers who are runners, for example, get together Sunday and they all run. But now, if they all run at their own pace, they're going to be running at a different pace. Um, um, they can, but if you can afford a $200 pair of shoes, you can afford a $60 heart monitor.
True.
Um, go to Walmart and buy the shoes for $20,
Mhm.
that are just as good. And if you buy the flat ones, and you'll have money left over.
There you go. Wise wisdom.
Bill, I appreciate this conversation. I could have used it about 20 years ago, but I appreciate this conversation. I know we just hit the tip of the iceberg, but there's plenty of content with you out there. I'm pretty sure Rich probably listened to 10 podcasts. I probably listened to five or six getting ready for this one. So there's plenty out there. If the listeners want to go find it, you got plenty of books. Thank you today for all this information. You ready for the
Thank you,
final four,
Jimmy. I
Rich?
appreciate it. And Rich,
Yes, let's get him with the final four. Thank you.
All right. Are you a coffee drinker?
I am. I drink coffee because I love it. I love the taste of good coffee. It's hard to find good coffee. That's why I almost always make it myself. Um, I drink it because it makes my brain feel good. My brain works well without it. Um, I was writing a song. I woke up the other day with a song, uh, and it was very intense. And I came out and grabbed my guitar, and I spent probably an hour writing this song without making coffee. I mean, so I love coffee. I'm not addicted to it, um, but it does help the brain focus certain ways, and that might come from the fact that when I was a kid, I had all kinds of, you know, brain issues. Um, being a poor student, I couldn't focus on things like, but but it also is important for the metabolism because it can help you burn more body fat. If you
I,
put a teaspoon of sugar in it or a half a teaspoon, it's not going to help you burn body fat. But the caffeine, and I have a video on how to make that kind of coffee. I have some articles about how caffeine can help burn body fat, and people can find those quite easily.
so
And I only drink organic coffee.
how do you brew it and how do you take it? You take a black?
It depends on the day and where I am. Right now on the road, I'm drinking it black. When I'm home, I make what is called, and you'll see this online, Phil's Fat Burning Coffee, which is the best uh, cappuccino-like coffee you've ever had. It's a combination of uh, coconut oil, heavy cream, raw cacao, unsweetened cacao, um, and a whole egg, and you blend it together. So you don't really know those ingredients are in there. As soon as you say egg and coffee, people go, "Ooh,"
Mm.
you wouldn't know there was an egg in there. Um, but it's a meal essentially, and it helps burn body fat. And I mean, you could, depending on how much you put in there, you can be getting 400 calories, all healthy foods. Um, but when I'm on the, and then that's my morning coffee when I'm home, and then I'll have a cup midday, and that's black. When I'm on the road, everything's black. Um, but it's the taste that's wonderful and the feeling that's wonderful, and um, being careful not to overdo it. Many people are drinking coffee beyond their stress adaptation ability. And so if drinking 7 cups a day is too much, you got to find out where your level is where it doesn't bother you.
I have had when you first put that recipe out, I dabbled with the egg, and because Jimmy and I had dabbled with the bulletproof fat burning coffee
Yeah, yeah.
before that, and then when I think it was around when I was living in Oklahoma, so around like 2015 or 2016, I would dabble with I think I was using just an egg yolk at the time. But yeah, it is delicious. So I can attest to your recipe, and I would recommend any coffee enthusiasts go to your website and check out that recipe and play around with it.
Yeah, there's a variety of recipes that people can use. But it's there's value beyond the taste. There's physiological value in caffeine when we tolerate it.
Yeah. Phil, do you have any daily practices or rituals that you do on a regular basis to show up as the strongest version of Dr. Phil Maffetone?
I do my thing. I do my thing. Um, um, I get up in the morning. My subconscious brain has been busy all night with a schedule for me. I may not know what it is right away, but I get up and I will start typically have coffee, and um, coffee involves meditation because you're sitting um, out in the woods, or you're in a nice area, maybe listening to music. So you're kind of meditating. That's a I don't like calling it meditation because people think meditation is, you have to go somewhere and be in a certain position. And I mean, I'm meditating between your questions. So we have a brain that naturally meditates. We go into this alpha wave state. And I do that all day long. So that's a pretty regular thing. It's a real necessity for my brain. I learned that back, I think, in high school. Um, but I'll start writing. I'll often have ideas for articles, general articles on health or fitness, ideas for research topics, um, music ideas. Maybe I'm working on a new song that I wake up with an answer to the question, well, why don't we have this transition from the verse to the chorus a little nice? So the my day goes that way, and I preparing food is a big part of the process. I spend a lot of time and effort preparing healthy food, so that's built into that plan for the day. And so all that is sort of regular routine for me. It's being passionate for all those things. And passion's a requirement for the brain. I don't know if you saw my happy birthday video, but it just came out. And I talk about age. How can we age better? How can our brain age better? Is losing memory and um, diminishing brain function normal? It's not. We should be able to have a better, unlike our body, we should be able to have a better and better brain until the day we die. And that's a passion of mine, not only teaching about that but learning about it. I'm always learning. Um, and so I had a little spoof. It's a video. It's a short video. It's a spoof on birthdays, the ageism component of it. And people celebrate getting old. People celebrate the loss of our youth. Really? We want to do that? We should celebrate life every day instead. And so I wrote, it all started, I don't know when it was, a year ago. I saw that the old traditional Happy Birthday to You song, the copyright ended. And I thought, aha. So I wrote a new version in a minor key. And that's on the video. Um, so gosh, how did we get into that?
Because your passion seeps through
Oh,
everything you're
yes,
talking about, sir.
We'll
that's what
put
it
that we'll
is.
put that video in the show notes for the people to
Great.
enjoy.
Phil, what are you listening to right now? Music, podcasts, audiobooks? Are you reading anything?
I read scientific research almost every day. Um, I don't usually listen to podcasts, especially my own. Um, I always share them, so this one will be shared. Um, um, but it's a good question with music because it's something that professional musicians, often ask each other. Hey, how you doing? I haven't seen you in a few weeks. What are you listening to these days? So in my book, Be Sharp, I talk about one of the powerful things for the brain is to listen to music, but there's two components. There's one, listening to the music we love, and I won't go into why all this is so wonderful. But listen to the music we love. We all have music we fell in love to, and music that it brings us back to a wonderful time in life. Uh, I mean, it should be a wonderful time now, but this is a special period. And we should listen to music we've never heard before because it's a surprise for the brain. And one thing the brain loves as much as listening to the oldies, our oldies, is a surprise. Wow, did you hear that new song or that new album by so and so? Just wonderful stuff. And you don't have to like it. In the book, I talk about a now I'm getting my case histories mixed up, but I think I was talking about a concert pianist, and all he did was play the piano. And I said, well, okay, one of the things you could do is listen to new music you've not heard before. And I recommended a Nirvana song. And it was like training slow. He comes back to me, why'd you have me listen to that thing for?
Hmm.
You know, well, it surprised his brain and it expanded his mind. What you do when you hear something you've never heard before is you make connections in the brain you've never made before. Those are the aha moments we have. And even if you don't like it, and it was sometime later that he said, hey, it was interesting that Nirvana guy was using the same notes I use in my concertos. So you know, I try to listen to music and I hear from people, maybe something from Rick or something from somebody, have you heard this song? So lately I've been listening to Lisa Hannigan, um, who's an Irish singer-songwriter, folk singer-songwriter, really great songwriter. Um, and always searching for new things. Sometimes an album escaped me in the 60s, and I'll think about it and I say, "Oh wow, I never heard that album." And I would have heard some of the songs on the radio back then, but not the others, and that's always a really wonderful treat. So what am I listening to? The Beatles are common. Crosby, Stills and Nash. Gosh, I mean I probably spend time every day lying down with my eyes closed, listening to music. Sometimes it's an oldie, sometimes it's something I've never heard before. Sometimes it's one or two songs, depending on how much time I want to put into that. Sometimes it's a whole album. Um, and the benefits for the brain are amazing. They're just amazing. Not even considering that, hey, you're going to stop your crazy day for 5 minutes, 10, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and relax and be in an alpha state. What an incredible healthy thing to do. Plus, it's a lot of fun.
There you have it, folks. Dr. Phil Maffetone said it's okay to sit down and listen, lay down and listen to some music, whether it's one song, two songs, or a whole album.
Especially in the evening instead of, the things that people watch. Like,
Yeah.
it's not so much the things they watch. Some of them are good, but it's the commercials that you're forced to
Yeah, that's a
unhealthy for your brain.
that's a topic for another podcast
Yes.
with you, sir. Last one we have for you, and sometimes it's not necessarily even a thing that people consider guilty, but do you have a guilty pleasure?
Um, Sometimes I eat too much cacao paste.
Okay.
Sometimes I'll have an extra cup of coffee if I go to my daughter's house and they make wonderful coffee. So I'll have a double espresso at 1 p.m. Um, but it's not so much guilty because it's not beyond my
Sure.
body's limit. Um, I've long overcome the 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 hang up about being lazy. I'm lazy because I'm human. All humans are lazy. That's how we developed into this super species. We want to find out how we can do this thing in a shorter period of time with less energy. Man, we got to use our brain to do that. And it could take longer, but the next time we do it, it's only going to take a minute instead of 20 or whatever. I want to follow my passions in the most intense way as possible. And if I don't go to that party, which I really didn't care about, I'm going to do that.
Well,
So
looking at,
I don't know if that answers the question,
yeah,
but
but I would say looking at your body of work, if you're lazy, I don't know what to consider Jimmy and I.
one
Amen,
thing that
Rich.
people ask me, this is still not as common, but it's still people ask me, how often do I cheat on food? And specifically, they're talking about running sometimes too, but how often do I cheat on food? I don't, never, ever. I've learned the hard way.
Mm, yep. Like I said, when we first started, you got to get through it to get to it. So it's sometimes you got to learn those lessons the hard way, and sometimes
You
some of them
do.
take longer than others. But yeah, the cleaner things get, the healthier things get, the bigger the gaps get when you do have those cheats, and then the back end of it is such a disaster that you eventually come to it that it's just not worth a couple minutes
Yeah,
or
you
seconds of math
develop,
pleasure.
yeah, you develop this awareness of your body, and after a while, you say, "God, I don't, my brain's not working as well after I had that salad with those little toasty things they dump on there, or the bread I had a lunch. It's just so we become aware of these things, and we don't want to feel that way. The addiction gets in the way, but eventually the addiction slides away, and it's wonderful to think and feel the way I do, and I don't, yeah, I don't sprint as fast as I used to, but I think better, I create better than I've ever created in my life. And I'm hoping tomorrow that even improves more.
Dr. Maffetone, I appreciate this conversation tremendously. You are a wealth of knowledge. I thank you so much for your work. I thank you for taking time out of your morning and enjoying your morning coffee with the Airy Bros. I think I might need a little bit more coffee to wake up this morning. But thank you so much for your time and all your
Thank
work.
you. Thank you. This has been a lot of fun. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and like Jimmy said, we just really scratched the tip of the iceberg with a lot of the stuff that you do. So it would be an honor and a pleasure to get you back on here at some point and go a little bit more in depth from a nutritional perspective and talk about being a fat adaptive and those sorts of things. And again, kind of flipping the paradigm of nutrition and sport.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
Awesome. Have a great day.